Not to Rhydon? Are you serious? A crit? No, 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 stop! Aerodactyl is a scary and intimidating Pokemon. Will being able to learn the best rock move in Gen 1 improve its time in a solo Pokemon challenge? Ever since its anime debut, Aerodactyl has always been cool. However, obtaining one required a really curious kid, or one with a guidebook, as the old Amber can only be found in Pewter City way after anybody would want to go back there. Then, after you obtain it, then you have to realize what you had, because it's not called a fossil, it's called Old Amber. So taking it to the fossil scientist is not exactly obvious. So, little to say, it's a heavy sought after Pokemon once you've faced Lance's Aerodactyl, and it really has the stats to back up just how cool it is. As we learned from Vaporeon, Lapras, Muk, and Kangaskhan, having a very high HP stat like 80 is a gift. In a speedrun, you want to try and go for the Pokemon Centers as few times as possible, and surviving extra attacks is always a plus. Bolstering defense of 65 and special of 60, it's uniquely middling. Most Pokemon we've done here on the channel is either defensively heavy or special heavy. So, in theory, nothing should really be able to one-shot us. But with an attack of 105 and 2 physical typings means it's going to be an offensive juggernaut like Kangaskhan and Muk. The real kicker is the speed of 130. In Gen 1, your chance to crit is based off your speed stat, so this calculates out to just over 25%. So even if our moves are resisted or we're put in a terrible situation, we should be able to luck out of it eventually with enough resets. But now the part you all clicked on this video for. Aerodactyl is a rock flying type that doesn't learn any rock moves. So today we'll be giving Aerodactyl Rock Slide with the assistance of a program called GameHook after picking up the TM in Celadon. Why does this matter, you may ask? Well, good question. When you take a look at this moveset, you'll start to see the big picture. We can learn nothing but flying and normal moves, making most matchups very difficult. Yes, we can learn Fire Blast, but the move is inaccurate, our special stat isn't very high, and quite frankly, fire moves don't really give us much of an advantage during the Elite Four. Rock Slide, on the other hand, should make one of the most difficult battles in the game a lot easier. Not to mention the damage boost from Stab, it should be a game-changing move, but by how much, if at all? This challenge is going to be identical all the way to Celadon, and for the most part, you'll be seeing the same battles play out the same way. So I'm going to implement side-by-side comparisons to the run, and when I need to separate the footage, I will. The rules are going to be the same as they always are. They will be located in the description section of this video, or pause the screen if you'd like to see them. If you want to help this channel grow, please comment, tweet for the YouTube algorithm. First off, we're going to start the game by grabbing our level 5 Aerodactyl and replacing Charmander with the Universal Pokemon Randomizer to make sure the champ has a Blastoise. I give them the nicknames Blast for the regular Aerodactyl and Arrow for the one with Rock Slide. It was kind of a naming joke we came up with on stream. The first champ battle is always going to be easy. Squirtle doesn't have a water move yet, and our attack stat is pretty darn good with Wing Attack. Despite the exact same starting moveset and everything, we're going to be seeing a slight deviation here as we're going to be battling Champ 1A with our Rock Slide Aerodactyl. I decided that the Rock Slide Aerodactyl was going to have a pretty big advantage, so I decided to play with that Aerodactyl first. So, our original Aerodactyl, without Rock Slide, is going to have a massive advantage, being able to be the third run. And since I'm mentioning this deviation, you can probably imagine this battle did not go well. On top of that, our Rock Slide Aerodactyl is going to have a massive disadvantage going into Brock. And this is obviously because we just don't know what level to be. We have to test out at some point, and quite frankly, I got there at level 11, so I decided to take a shot. Now, Brock is a whole different can of worms. Anytime you have a Pokemon with only normal moves or poison moves, you're going to have a tough time, no matter what. Even with our high attack stat, and with 35 PP for Wing Attack, which is quite a lot more than usual, we still have a very difficult time getting through the Geodudes. And even after that, Onix is no walk in the park either. I mean, yes, we have agility, which is good for the bide turns, but Wing Attack is still not a good attack, and we're doing very little amounts of damage. The only saving grace we really have is that we have a 25% chance to crit, and that's more than you can say for most Pokemon. Arrow unfortunately just does not get a first attempt victory. Meanwhile, Blast is able to get a first attempt victory. Due to the very close nature of that first attempt, I go ahead and give it a second try with Arrow. And unfortunately, that try does not go very well either. Level 11 just does not work out, and it's another very close loss. Now, third time's the charm, as we're able to get through this attempt with just as much ease as the other Aerodactyl did. And with that, it's time to bring up our splits chart, so we're going to be able to see just how well we're doing in real time. Now it's probably about the time to tell you guys something that's probably going to come up a lot on this run. Aerodactyl is part of the slow level up group, and as you guys probably know from our Lapras run, that just about anything in the slow level up group is going to require a ton of training. So with that in mind, I head to Mount Moon and I get as much training as I possibly can get. In fact, the training really doesn't change from run to run. Since we're not battling wild Pokemon, the experience is going to be just about identical. So we're going into Champ 2 at basically the same level. There's still really not much to say about this run, because currently we still have Wing Attack and Agility. Yes, Agility is a badge boosting move, but it's not going to do us a whole lot of good this early in the game with such low stats. We're pretty much just praying that Pidgeotto doesn't use Sand Attack, and then after that, we just use Wing Attack, and we wing it. And then we're gonna win or we're gonna lose, and luckily both of them won. Now, just like Ammonite, our first typing is Rock, therefore Misty is a no-go. We're not going to resist water moves and only take double damage. She's only going to use water moves, which is going to force us to actually skip Misty. Now, the more I play the game, the more I start learning where all of the trainers are and what Pokemon they have, so I can avoid Pokemon trainers that have, like, let's say, Squirtle, and make sure to battle the ones that have, let's say, Butterfree. This allows me to gain XP and not lose a lot of time. Now, one thing of note is that we can't learn Body Slam, but I do make sure to pick up Rest, as that's going to help for the Exploding Hiker later in the run. Thanks to all the extra levels from all of the extra training, we're now able to two-shot the Pidgeotto, giving it very few chances to actually hit us with a Sand Attack. Luckily, on neither of these attempts are we going to be hit by a Sand Attack, so it's just going to be a straight Wing Attack sweep, as none of his Pokemon could really do much damage until we get to Wartortle. Now, for the Rock Slide Aerodactyl, we get very unlucky and we get confused from Confusion on Kadabra, and unfortunately that leads to a loss. But on the next attempt, we're able to get through just fine, as Wartortle only manages to get a bubble in before we get the win. With nowhere else to go, we now have to fight Misty, who's only going to use Water Gun. So we have a very big hurdle against us. Luckily, at this point of the game, we are a significantly higher level. Last time we didn't stand a chance. This time we're able to actually one or two-shot the Staryu, and the Starmie doesn't go too bad as long as we can manage a crit, and with a 25% chance to crit, that does seem possible. Unfortunately for Rock Slide Aerodactyl, things just don't seem to be going very well, and we take a first try loss. Meanwhile, the second try also does not go very well, as we take a critical hit Water Gun. But on the next attempt, we managed to get that 25% crit and get ourselves the win. Now we're going to find ourselves going to Surge next. Now, of course, you're probably not going to see ourselves going to Surge on the non-Rock Slide Aerodactyl, and this is because I figured out Surge was a bad idea. But, you know, you have to learn that Surge is a bad idea. So let's go ahead and take a look at Rock Slide's journey to losing against Surge. On the first attempt, we then use a Wing Attack, which doesn't do very much damage. I was very perplexed. I thought Wing Attack would do a lot of damage. It wasn't until later that I actually found out that Wing Attack, being a flying move, is resisted by electric types. Who knew? Anyways, our first attempt ends thanks to a Thundershock crit. The next attempt then also doesn't go very well, as Thundershock is able to do devastatingly large amounts of damage. Then, on the next attempt, Thunderbolt followed by a Thundershock is able to take us down. It was then that I finally realized that if we are not able to take down Surge within 3 attempts, it's just not going to happen. And because electric types are resisting our Wing Attack, it's just not going to happen. Even if I manage to use Agility on Pikachu and don't take very much damage at all, I'm still going to lose. On the bright side, after Surge, things go pretty smooth, as Rock Tunnel is not going to be an issue thanks to our high HP and a resistance to normal moves. So, all we really need to do is use Rest, and even if he does use a few rock throws, we can manage to survive. So, we're able to get through no problem. This is where our paths diverge just a little bit, as Rock Slide Aerodactyl decides to visit the mart and pick up protein before we battle Erika. I managed to be able to buy 3 proteins, and then we make our way to Erika. Erika, unfortunately, is going to be a very easy challenge. So easy, in fact, that I actually didn't even manage to pick up Fly for our non-Rock Slide Aerodactyl. But I did pick up Fly for Rock Slide Aerodactyl because Fly is going to be just a little bit faster, but also you never know how a first try is going to go. And after Erika is defeated, we now have enough money to buy 5 proteins for the non-Rock Slide Aerodactyl. Now this is where things start to get very interesting in the run, because now our second Aerodactyl has Rock Slide. Also, we actually haven't even beaten Surge yet. It's a very different feeling going out of order. But we make our way through Saffron, head down to Vermilion, and take on Surge. A battle that was once very, very difficult is now going to be made trivial thanks to our Rock Slide move, which is not being resisted by his electric types, and we get a stab bonus, so it's a big improvement. Although, it does appear that because we're not using Rock Slide on our left Aerodactyl, we have to use Fly. Fly gives him just enough time to survive a hit and paralyze us, but luckily we still get the win in the end. Now that we're back on track once again, it's time to go ahead and battle Champ 4. This time, however, we're going to have a serious advantage because Rock Slide is going to be very effective against Pidgeotto and Growlithe. But that's not really going to make much of a difference in this run because we're nearly 10 levels higher than his Pokemon, and really the only difference in this matchup is that I spent time moving some of my moves at the beginning of this game. Otherwise, it would go nearly identical, so Fly and Rock Slide really did not have much of a difference. Now, with the Pokeflute in hand, we can finally make our way down Cycling Road and work our way through the Safari Zone. After the Safari Zone, we then learned that I made a mistake. We actually bought too many proteins, as I'm not able to actually use the protein we picked up in the Safari Zone. Regardless, we need to work our way towards Koga. And surprisingly, the Pokemon trainers in Koga's gym weren't that big of a deal. We didn't have a reset or anything, which takes us to Koga himself. This battle really does not make one bit of a difference whether I have Rock Slide or Fly, because his mono poison types don't resist or are weak to either move. So really, this battle goes down to if we're going to be hit by Smokescreen or not, or if Muck ends up using Minimize, which honestly doesn't really happen in either one of these. We can survive a self-destruct thanks to our rock typing. During the run, I didn't realize this, but there is one place we can go before battling the rival, and that's actually the Fighting Dojo. But unfortunately, hindsight is 20/20, so I got some battles in at Silphco, whatever I thought I could do really easily, and then I decided to battle Champ 5, which I expected to be a very difficult battle, especially since the level of his Pokemon have grown a ton. The only thing that's actually good about this battle is that his Blastoise hasn't learned Hydro Pump yet, so we're only going to be dealing with one that knows Bubble. The strategy for this is just a little bit different for both of our Aerodactyls. We're very close to leveling up, but as you can probably tell, our right Aerodactyl is a significantly lower level, and this causes our strategy to be no different actually. The left Aerodactyl is able to set up with agility after taking down a few Pokemon, whereas the right Aerodactyl doesn't need to set up at all because the move Rock Slide is actually very good in this matchup, and thanks to very little damage from Blastoise, we're able to get through without too much damage. Of course, we do take a Water Gun in both instances. Now that we're finished with Silphco, we have a few choices ahead of us. We could battle Sabrina, and that would be easy because a flying type that's going to be able to outspeed is going to be a big damage dealer. But there is also the decision to use Blaine, and the thing is, Blaine is not going to be able to do any damage. Rock types are able to resist both normal and fire moves, so quite literally, he's going to be able to do nothing. But more importantly, all the trainers in his gym are going to be able to do nothing. So it's just free experience. And why wouldn't I take care of all the trainers before battling Sabrina? That just seems like great strategy. Before long, we're able to make it to Blaine with literally no issues. Now, of course we're going to beat Blaine, but the one thing that I want you guys to pay attention to is just how fast we're beating his Pokemon. Rock Slide is starting to make up ground, and while we were training, our Rock Slide Aerodactyl was able to use Fly, meaning we could go into Blaine without healing, whereas our non-Rock Slide Aerodactyl had to heal before this Blaine battle. So you can actually tell that we're going to be starting to make up ground real quick, even with all of those extra resets at the beginning. Thanks to all of the practice from the Rock Slide runs, I was able to learn that I need to buy some calcium for the non-Rock Slide Aerodactyl because we're going to have some pretty big troubles ahead and we're going to need some extra special. But now we're going to be able to go ahead and battle Sabrina next. As I mentioned before, this battle is going to be a joke. Her Pokemon are not going to be faster than mine, and I'm a heavy physical attacker, and most of her Pokemon, except for Mr. Mime, are pretty darn defensively weak. So we pretty much one-shot sweep her entire team, except Rock Slide Aerodactyl does miss the first attack. Up next is going to be Giovanni, and Giovanni is not going to be a good matchup for either one of our Pokemon, as both Rock Slide and Fly are going to be resisted by just about every one of his Pokemon. But there is a key difference going on here. As you could probably imagine, having Rest on our moveset does allow us a little bit more flexibility to do what we want when we want to do it. And because Giovanni is known for not being very good in Red-Blue version, we're not going to take a whole lot of damage from his Pokemon either, so 2 turns of rest is not going to be that big of a deal. As the battle begins, it's going to be very obvious that both of the Aerodactyls in very different situations, as Aero is very close to leveling up, so I can't set up my agilities. Meanwhile, Blast is very far away from leveling up, so we can set up our agilities, which means our damage is going to be very different for both of them. Also, Blast still has Swift, whereas I'm not using Swift for Rock Slide Aerodactyl because we can just use either Rock Slide or Fly. However, it was until later that I realized Fly is better for both Nidoqueen and Nidoking because Ground does resist Rock, whereas Ground does not resist Flying. I don't think this mistake would have really caused me to be able to one-shot either the Nidoqueen or Nidoking, but we still do take a paralyzation off of the Nidoqueen, and that does suck. And Rhydon for some reason smells blood in the water because it takes down her Rock Slide Aerodactyl with a stomp. The next try doesn't really go any different. We use agility to boost up our defense, but other than that, he just didn't use stomp. So we got ourselves a victory after quite a few turns. I waste no time and head directly to Champ 6 to see how we'll do. Now, Pidgeot is only going to use agility. I didn't know this on the first run, but it didn't matter because we one-shot it. But it's only going to use agility because its other moves are going to be resisted. As for Rhyhorn, it really can't do much damage to us. In fact, it's actually quite helpful because we still have Rest on our non-Rock Slide Aerodactyl, allowing us to actually badge boost if we really want to. Growlithe, Execute, and Alakazam. I know, Alakazam is not going to be a challenge because we can take it out with either Fly or Rock Slide. The big challenge is going to be the Blastoise. Unfortunately for the non-Rock Slide Aerodactyl, Blastoise is then able to hit us with a Hydro Pump and take us out in one single hit. Luckily, on the next attempt, both the Rock Slide and the non-Rock Slide Aerodactyl are able to take down Blastoise with a bit of luck. Now that we've reached the Elite Four, things are going to change pretty quick. So I'm going to go ahead and split up the footage here, and we're going to go ahead and start with the non-Rock Slide Aerodactyl. Since this is the 3rd run Aerodactyl, you're going to see peak performance of Aerodactyl here. This is Aerodactyl at its best. Just remember that its best is not that good because it is a flying rock type, which is weak to both water and ice. So there's really not much I can do to make this battle any better. One of the things that I can do, however, is use all my rare candies. And if I use enough rare candies to get to level 54, I will learn Hyper Beam. Hyper Beam is going to be pretty pivotal in this run. We are now level 58. So for Dugong, we start off with a Fly, which does a little bit more than half, followed by an Aurora Beam that gives us an attack drop. But luckily, we bypass the attack drop and get a crit. Then, for Cloyster, we go ahead and use a Fly, which does crit and do more than half, but unfortunately, Clamp then takes us out. On the next attempt, we try a Hyper Beam, which doesn't finish it off, and it takes us out in 2 Aurora Beams. On the next attempt, Cloyster manages to finish us off with a Clamp, as our Fly manages to do very, very little damage. On the next attempt, we actually manage to get a crit Fly, followed by getting an attack drop from an Aurora Beam. But then, we managed to take out Cloyster after a few more Flies. But see, here's the thing. We now have 2 attack drops, which is pretty darn unlucky, and after seeing how much damage that Fly does on Slowbro, you can probably imagine why we quit immediately. On the next attempt, we get taken out by a Clamp on Cloyster. But on the very next attempt, things finally start going right for us, as we make it to Slowbro, And now we can start setting up with agility. Once fully set up with agility, we can then use fly until we take too much damage from his water guns. Once we take a little too much damage, we can then use rest. Now that we're fully set up with rest and agility, we can go ahead and slowly work our way through the Slowbro. Unfortunately, the Slowbro now has 528 defense, so we're really just hoping for a crit here, as she uses super potions that make things go even slower. Now we're going to be fighting Jinx, and Jinx is going to be just as fragile as any Alakazam, so one fly does the trick, which takes us to Lapras. So we use a Hyper Beam, it misses, and we get taken out with a Hydro Pump, which then sends us in a Lost Spiral as we get taken out with an Aurora Beam from Cloyster, a Water Gun from Slowbro, followed by an Aurora Beam from Dewgong, and finally a Clamp from Cloyster. But on the next attempt, things start coming up Millhouse, as we're then finally able to use a Hyper Beam on Lapras, which doesn't take it out in one hit, but it puts it in Super Potion range, allowing us to get an extra turn. Unfortunately, we have a recharge turn, but she only uses a Blizzard that doesn't take us out, and then the following Hyper Beam takes her down. Alright, well, that was painful, but let's go ahead and see just how bad our first attempt Aerodactyl is going to go. Keep in mind, I don't know to use all my rare candies yet, so we're going to be testing out just how bad the Lorelei battle is level by level. Our first attempt is at level 46, nearly 12 levels lower than our non-Rock Slide Aerodactyl, and we're already doing more damage. In fact, we've taken down Dewgong on our first try. Of course, Cloyster is still a bit devastating, and we just learned that. Our next attempt is at level 50, where we one-shot the Dewgong thanks to a crit, followed by the Cloyster, who is also one-shot thanks to a crit. Then, for the Slowbro, we go ahead and use a Rock Slide, which unfortunately is not that much more powerful than Fly. But luckily, we still take down Slowbro pretty quick, followed by the Jinx, who is immediately taken down with a Rock Slide. Then, for Lapras, we almost get a first try victory as she one-shots us with Hydro Pump. On the next attempt at level 53, we can now one-shot the Dewgong. And for Cloyster, we can do more than half, but unfortunately, Cloyster then crits and can take us out. On the following attempt, we finally get the one-shot on Cloyster thanks to a crit, and we move on to Slowbro. I decide that it's a decent time to start setting up, as Slowbro only has Water Gun and really can't do a whole lot to us. So I get my 3 agilities in, and the unthinkable happens. One of the slowest Pokemon in the game manages to get a crit, and we take a little too much damage and then get taken out on the next turn. On the next attempt, we make it right back to Slowbro, but unfortunately with significantly lower health. And unfortunately, we're only able to set up 1 agility before then having to switch to Rock Slide. Luckily, she only uses Water Gun once, which moves us to Jinx, who is obviously taken down with a single Rock Slide. But unfortunately, Lapras is able to take us out with a Blizzard. Seeing that we weren't able to one-shot the Lapras, I then decide, well, we should probably consider 2 more levels. So, I head up to level 55 and start battling the Dewgong. Unfortunately, she then uses an Aurora Beam that lowers our attack stat, and quite frankly, our attack stat is the best feature that we have. So, our lowered attack is not going to be doing a whole lot to her team, but at least we're able to do some damage, which is pretty decent. We can make it through all the way to Slowbro, and thanks to our crit rate, we're actually being able to get through our low attack. And thankfully, we're able to get through and get to Lapras, but unfortunately, the Lapras is just too strong as it takes us out with a Blizzard. On the next attempt, we one-shot the Dewgong, and then on Cloyster, we almost one-shot it, but unfortunately, we get stuck in a clamp that seems to last forever, because it does, and we get taken out. Weird stances aside, we make it right back to Lapras. Unfortunately, our first Rock Slide misses, but she only uses a Blizzard that manages not to finish us off, as the next Rock Slide is then able to crit and finish her off. The next 2 battles with the Blackbelt and Agatha are going to be comically easy, so we're going to go ahead and do them side by side. The Blackbelt then starts off with his usual Onix. Now we have a decision to make. Do we want to set up with agility or not? Well, both of our Aerodactyls have very high amounts of XP, and that's probably because we used rare candies, so our XP is going to be consistent. Now, as far as damaging attacks, well, a Rock Slide Aerodactyl, even though Rock Slide's not going to be much more effective than Fly, Fly is going to be effective on the fighting types, so we want to use Rock Slide on the rock types. However, for the other Aerodactyl, we're just going to have to use Fly and pray that we can finish off the rest of the team. We can throw in some Hyper Beams now and again, because, well, he doesn't have any Pokemon that are going to threaten us, and we need to keep a Fly ready for the Machamp at the end. Honestly though, this battle is not difficult at all. The only thing that's really holding us back is a bunch of Fly misses. Which, I mean, if you're gonna start missing a move that's pretty darn accurate, I guess, well, the easy battle is probably gonna be the place that you want to start missing those moves. Anyways, before very long, we're gonna be able to defeat all of the Blackbelt's Pokemon and move on to Agatha. Agatha is typically one of the hardest battles in the entire game, but today we have a Pokemon that is faster than hers. Sure, we might not be able to one-shot them, but that means she only has one attempt to even hit us, and she usually prefers to use confusion moves. And even though confusion moves are bad, we still have a 50-50 chance of hitting her. Regardless, the only difference between the battles here are that the Rock Slide Aerodactyl ends up using agility on Arbok, and that's mainly just because in a first attempt you want a badge boost just in case. And that's about it. We get the win pretty quick. This is where things started to get a little complicated once again, so we're going to go ahead and switch back to our single runs. The battle then starts off pretty weird, as we then miss our first Fly, followed by Gyarados missing. So 95% chance and 80% chance. Pretty unlikely, but it does happen. But then we get hit by a critical hit Hydro Pump. On the next attempt, since a critical hit Fly didn't take down Gyarados in one hit, I'm forced to use Hyper Beam, which doesn't take it out in one hit, and we get taken down with 2 Hydro Pumps. On the next attempt, we managed to miss a Hyper Beam, followed by him missing a Hydro Pump. And then our next Hyper Beam crits and gets us the first victory. I'm not really sure what to do for Dragonair, so I just go with a Fly to see how much damage we'll do. It does quite a bit more than I expect. And since Dragonair can only really use Hyper Beam or Dragon Rage to deal damage, it's not that big of a far cry to think that we're just going to take it out with 2 hits. Then, when we make it to Aerodactyl, we really need to test the waters, but unfortunately, a Fly that's even a critical hit doesn't do that much damage. After he uses a Hyper Potion, there's really not much more I can do. I'm just going to continue using Fly since Hyper Beam is obviously not going to take it out, and then, once we take a little too much damage, I then need to switch over to a rest. Once we've finally rested, we can then eventually get ourselves in a position where we can get ourselves the win. Unfortunately, we have been hit by Supersonic, so we do hit ourselves in confusion. But it isn't before long before our Hyper Beam then manages to finish it off. Then, for Dragonite, I'm not really sure what to do, so I go ahead and use a Fly to see how much damage I can possibly do, and then once I do a little bit less than half, a Hyper Beam should probably take it out, and it does. Hopefully the Rock Slide Aerodactyl will have a much easier time, since Rock Slide's going to be very effective on the flying type Gyarados. Now, he starts off with Gyarados, we use our Rock Slide, it doesn't finish it off, and he takes us out with a critical hit Hydro Pump. The next encounter is very peculiar, as we miss our Rock Slide, he uses a Hydro Pump that deals us down to 8, we then use a Rock Slide that doesn't finish him off, he then misses Hydro Pump, and then we finish him off with the next Rock Slide. However, we now have 8 HP for the rest of the team, so I must be risky, use a Hyper Beam to take down both of the Dragonairs, which it works. Then for Aerodactyl, we take it out with a Rock Slide, which happens to be a crit, followed by Dragonite, where Rock Slide does more than half, but he only uses a barrier, as we're then able to take it down with the next Rock Slide. Now it's time to head right back over to the non-Rock Slide Aerodactyl and see how it's going to face the champion. The plan in this battle is to hopefully set up on the Pidgeot. We start with our first Fly, which does a little bit more than half, followed by then using an Agility. So he then uses a Sky Attack, and I just decide to finish him off with Fly. Then for Alakazam, I use a Fly which ends up missing, and we take pretty decent damage from Psybeam. But then the next Fly manages to hit, but unfortunately because he's set up that Reflect, it's a 2-turn KO. Thanks to all of those Psybeams, I'm forced to then use Rest on Rhydon, which allows him to use some Leers, although I'm not expecting to take a whole lot of physical damage from the rest of his team. So once I'm finished sleeping, I then use the rest of my agilities and start using Fly. Unfortunately, there's really not a whole lot I can do, as Fly is being resisted and so will Hyper Beam, so it's just gonna be an amalgamation of Fly attacks until we can finally take it down with a Hyper Beam. From here, it should be smooth sailing as we take down Arcanine with one single fly, followed by Exeggutor, which should also be a single fly thanks to a weakness. Blastoise knows both Blizzard and Hydro Pump, which is going to do massive damage if it hits, but thanks to 5 Leers and 3 Agilities, our special's now in the 300s and we don't need to worry about his attacks very much and we can just take him out with a few flies and a Hyper Beam. Rest was incredibly useful during that battle, so let's go ahead and see if Rock Slide will make up the difference of not having Rest in this final matchup. So Champ then starts with his usual Pidgeot, and now we have Rock Slide, which will be double effective, therefore knocking out Pidgeot in one single hit. Followed by Alakazam, where Rock Slide is going to be more than enough to take it out in a single hit. Then for Rhydon, we're not very much damage, so we don't even need Rest. So we're going to go ahead and set up our Agilities, bring our stats up pretty high, but the stats aren't going to be high enough, and because Rhydon isn't threatening in any way with Fury Attack, which we're going to resist, we're just going to go ahead and use some Hyper Beams to hopefully take a few more Leers before then using some Flies. Unfortunately, we only get hit by 2 Leers in the process, followed by Arcanine, which is going to be taken down thanks to a super effective Rock Slide, followed by Exeggutor by a super effective Fly, which then takes us to the Blastoise, who I'm not very sure if we're going to be able to take out in one hit. But I decide to use Rock Slide anyways, wasting a whole bunch of time in the process. I don't take it out because of a non-crit, but thanks to all of the badge boosts we were able to survive a blizzard and take it down with the second Rock Slide. And there we have it! We've beaten the game with both Aerodactyl with and without Rock Slide. Let's go ahead and take a look at our final splits. I had a pretty good idea that Rock Slide was going to improve Aerodactyl's time in this run. That's why I decided to do the Rock Slide Aerodactyl first, giving the regular Aerodactyl an advantage. With that advantage, you actually get to see just where Rock Slide starts to take effect and make big changes in the run. Those changes look to be taking place right around Gym 6, which happens to be Koga, and that makes a lot of sense, because right around then is when we start doing a lot of training. And that training is made much faster thanks to having Rock Slide. But not only that, it's just having the extra PP alone. Even by the time we make it to Lorelei, we get a whole lot of resets with the regular Aerodactyl, and that's just because there is no better option. Rest is just not going to allow us to overcome our weakness problem. And we can't really do any extra training because we're in the slow level up group, and plus I did a whole bunch of extra training as well. So at that point, it just goes down to when the best luck is going to happen. But for the Rock Slide Aerodactyl, it's just a matter of what level we were going to be, and because it was a first run, I had to figure out that level, so I had a whole bunch of resets. But if I were to replay the run with the knowledge that I've obtained from this first run, I'm obviously going to do better. And you know me, I'm not going to let something be determined by only one run. So let's go ahead and take a look at our second run. But before we get to that, I just want to say that I did attempt a regular Aerodactyl second run. However, unlike my usual video, I didn't finish this second Aerodactyl run. Up on screen right now is where the run actually managed to end. And yes, you would think, oh, you got one reset, that's not a big deal. The problem is the reset set me so incredibly far back because it was so incredibly unexpected that I just had to give up. But to be fair, I set the bar incredibly high by only having one reset all the way up to the Elite Four. I mean, you guys saw just how bad Aerodactyl really is. Anyways, we're gonna go ahead and start our run with the second Rock Slide Aerodactyl. I then give it the nickname Rocky as an homage to Rocky Balboa. Since this is a second run and you've already seen this twice now, I'm going to go ahead and speed through the footage as often as possible. But for the most part, the only changes are really that I added more training. So the footage is more of a formality, but you will be able to see in the bottom right hand corner that I am going to have the splits on screen. Now, we learned from the first run that we are not going to battle the optional rival. He's just a waste of time, we're going to get hit by Sand Attack, our move just doesn't do enough damage. However, as far as Brock is concerned, we definitely know what level to go in at. We're going to go in at level 12, then we're going to use Wing Attack, hopefully get 3 crits on Geodude, and then when we battle Onix, we're going to use Agility on the turns that he's actually using Bide, and then Wing Attack on the turns that he's not. And if we get enough crits, or just don't take enough defense drops, we can get through no problem. Then for Rival 2, there really is no change here. We're really just praying not to get hit by a sand attack, and then after that, the only thing that's going to make this any better is another higher level, and we may be maybe one level higher, but it's not going to make that much of a difference. Luckily, we don't get hit by a single sand attack, as you can see in the bottom left by the HP. Then, for Misty, there's not much of a change except we're at a significantly higher level. So, we're almost able to one-shot the Staryu, and then Starmie is able to use a few bubble beams to take us out. But on the next attempt, she only manages to use a few water guns and we get through. Learning from the first run, we're going to head over to the Celadon Mart to pick up some protein and then get Fly before taking on Erika. Then, obviously we're going to skip Surge and battle Erika. Fly is going to one-shot sweep her entire team. Wing Attack would have done the same job, but just a little bit slower. Now with Rock Slide in hand, we can go ahead and one-shot sweep Surge. And this time we are going to one-shot sweep because now we're a higher level. As for Koga, we then start out the battle, take out the coughing rather quickly, then Muck poisons us very early on. Luckily, Rock Slide is able to do consistent damage, we never get hit by a smokescreen, but unfortunately, at the beginning of the Wheezing battle, I missed that it was a crit, and I use another Rock Slide and I get taken out on the next attack as that Rock Slide doesn't take it out. On the next attempt, I then realize, oh, I forgot to teach Swift over Rest. So, I teach Swift, and I go into the Wheezing battle with no accuracy drops, so it didn't matter whatsoever. However, what did matter is, now I can't heal off the poison. So, I then take off damage real slowly, as my Rock Slides do not take it out quick enough. But on the next attempt, I make it back to the Wheezing battle, with one accuracy drop this time. But I have Rest, and Rest can't miss, because Rest is a status move. So once I take enough damage, I use Rest, and I get hit by a self-destruct. Then, for Champ 5, things are going to go very much in our favor as we have great moves for every member of his team except for Blastoise. But the thing is, his Blastoise doesn't know any good moves itself. The best move it knows is Water Gun, and for some reason it likes to use Bubble more than Water Gun. So even though it's a 3-hit KO, we still take down Blastoise. And Blaine is, well, Blaine is Blaine. And with Rock Slide, we have a major advantage against his entire team. It took a while for me to learn, but rock moves are good against fire types. I really thought it was just ground moves and water moves, but yeah, rock, who knew? Sabrina is going to be even easier than she was before, because as you may have noticed in the bottom right hand corner, we've lost some time. Yes, this isn't because of bad playing or resets, I have added significant amounts of extra training, mostly the dojo and to the right of Fuchsia. Next up is Giovanni, and this might be one of the most long and tedious battles of the entire run. And I wish I could say that I played it well, even after a second run where I knew that the right move to use on Nidoqueen was Fly, I still ended up using Rock Slide anyways. But one of the benefits of keeping Rest from the battle with Koga is that I can now use it on Rhydon if I need to, and because I'm poisoned, I absolutely need to. Then for Champ 6, we're easily going to take down Pidgeot with a Fly, but unfortunately we didn't level up for Rhyhorn and we're just going to have to take it down the normal way with some Flies. But now that we have leveled up, we can go ahead and set up some agilities here on Growlithe, so that way we're set up for the rest of the team. As Execute is taken down with a Fly, and Alakazam is taken out with 2 Flies, mostly thanks to a Reflect. Followed by Blastoise, where we take it down with 2 Rock Slides, but a Hydro Pump almost takes us out. It's finally time to see how much our training has paid off as we knock out Dugong in 1 hit, followed by the Cloyster, who we take out in 2 hits without getting an attack drop. And then for Slowbro, we're going to go ahead and use 1 Rock Slide to nearly do half damage, and then we're going to use a Hyper Beam to finish it off. And of course, Jinx is going to go down to a Rock Slide as well. And finally, the Lapras, which goes down in 1 hit, thanks to all of our training. And while the Black Belt footage is going, let's go ahead and just talk about how smooth that battle with Lorelei went. I mean, wow. We were planning ahead with all of those extra battles, and it worked out. To a T. We took down the Dugong with 1 shot, and we took down the Lapras in 1 shot. That's all we really could have asked for. Anyways, for the Black Belt, we took down his Onyxes with a mixture of Fly and Rock Slide, and we took down his fighting types with Fly. As for Agatha, this might be the first time I have ever swept Agatha without Earthquake or Dig. We're using Rock Slide here, and the only Pokemon that managed to survive a single hit is Arbok, and she only uses a super potion, so she actually never attacks me at any point. Quite frankly, I do get a bit lucky there with some crits, but wow. It's time to find out if all of our extra training made a difference in this Gyarados battle, because this battle is still going to be down to luck. Luckily for us, we got a crit, so it didn't even matter. So all of our extra training might have been pointless for this situation. Well, regardless, the rest of Lance's team goes down pretty quick. Last but certainly not least is the champion, whose Pidgeot goes down to a rock slide, followed by Alakazam, who manages to avoid a Hyper Beam and hit us for a massive Psychic, before then going down to the next Hyper Beam. Although, now, for Rhydon, we're down to 46 HP. And we've also got a special drop on top of it, not that the special matters at all, it's one extra badge boost. But now, we're not going to be able to tank a single Blizzard or Hydro Pump from the final Blastoise. And then for Arcanine, we take it out with a Rock Slide, followed by Executor with a Fly. And our final big moment, a Rock Slide on Blastoise, and he uses Withdraw, and we get ourselves the win. A pretty decent time. And we finish the game at level 65 with 112 real time, 444 game time, and 3 resets. So in conclusion, the chart on the left is specifically for the Rock Slide Aerodactyl's second run. As you can see, the training did indeed pay off, as the Elite Four then became consistent. Whereas the chart on the right represents the Rock Slide Aerodactyl versus the normal Aerodactyl. As you can see, the Rock Slide Aerodactyl does gain a significant amount of time, whereas the normal Aerodactyl does get an advantage. Because it has one more free slot, it is able to utilize Rest, which normally not an amazing move in Pokemon Red and Blue, but thanks to our Rock typing, we resist a lot of important moves in the game. So it becomes a very good typing. Now, as for the rankings, let's go ahead and take a look. Aerodactyl is bad. Its time was bad. Its reset amount was bad. Its level's really high. It really doesn't have a lot going for it. If it didn't learn Hyper Beam, it might be one of the worst Pokemon I've ever played. However, it wasn't Weezing bad, nor was it Kabuto bad. And honestly, Butterfree might not be where it's supposed to be, but that was mostly due to Sleep Powder luck. So I have no other place to put it but in between Butterfree and Weezing. I'm not really sure where to go in my next video, as I have a few videos lined up and I'm not really sure what order they're going to come out in. First is going to be Pokemon Crystal with only Alakazam, but we have a slight twist. Everything in the entire game is going to be shiny. Then I have a collaboration video lined up with Speedrunner0218. He's going to be releasing a video where both me and him are playing Cloyster, but I'm playing in Pokemon Blue and he's playing in Pokemon Leaf Green. And then I'm going to be releasing a video where we're doing the exact same thing, but my video is going to be on Slowbro. And then last but not least is going to be a Pokemon Blue video where I'm doing Mewtwo. It's just going to be something simple for the holidays, a nice quick video that I can make. If you like this kind of content, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. I try to post a full video weekly, and if not, at least a few shorts. Big thanks to Speedrunner0218 and Malfever for being my first 2 patrons. Consider becoming a patron yourself to help me make my dream of becoming a full-time content creator real. If you thought that this challenge was really cool, consider clicking the video in the top right, where I decide to play Pokemon, but with only Metronome.